allegiance. And at this point in time, I'd like to introduce the members of the commission that are here this evening. To my immediate right is James Fitzsimmons, a member of the commission. Next to Jim is Jeff Cohan, also a commission member. And to the far right is Jamie Hine, an alternate on the commission. To my immediate left is J.P. Vanoit, who is the vice chairperson of the commission. Next to J.P. is Steve Allenson, who is our secretary. And next to Steve is Dave Parent, who is also an alternate on the commission. At the staff table to our left, or to my left rather, is Cheryl Ann Tubby, our recording secretary, and next to Cheryl Ann is Kevin Pagini, our town planner. I'm Jim Syke, they're the chairperson of the commission. Our next order of business is to approve the minutes of our regular meeting on September 13th, 2023, as well as to approve the minutes of our September 20th, 2023 special meeting. So I'll start first with our minutes of our regular meeting, September 13th, 2023. Any commission members with any corrections, additions, omissions to the minutes? If none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes as written for Monday, September 13th, 2023.
We have a motion by Mr. Allenson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on.
Abstention.
And Mr. Benoit abstains. And moving on to our September 20, 2023 special meeting. Again, the same thing. Any additions, corrections, omissions to the minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes of the special meeting workshop of September 20th, 2023.
Do we have a second? I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Yes, abstention.
And Cheryl Ann, have you noted all of the individuals who's abstained? Good. Okay, before we get to our next order of business, I'd like to just indicate there's several items on our agenda that are not going to be heard this evening. First is the public hearing. It's a special permit revision for eight vacuum brooms, 6 feet in height, for 954 South Colony Road. There's no action at that request tonight. It's going to be continued to our November meeting. The next one is a special permit for nursing home to multifamily residential, 55 LLC, 55 Kondracki Lane. And again, the applicant has requested no action on that, and that will be continued to our November 13th, 2023 meeting. And the final one is item number 4. It's old business. It's a site plan, restaurant, bar, food trucks. Joe Flamini at 10 Mansion Road. That application has been withdrawn. With that, it brings us to our first order of business that we're going to hear this evening, which is a zoning text amendment put forward by the Planning and Zoning Commission for warehousing in the I-4, I-20, IX, and WI zones. And Mr. Allenson, if you please note, note the legal notice as well as all correspondence for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number 904-23, zoning text amendments in relation to warehousing to a number of different sections, which include Section 4.8, I-40, I-20, Section 4.9, IX, and Section 4.10, WI districts, new definitions added to Section 2.2, changes to parking requirements for the new proposed warehousing definitions, changes to the bulk requirements table 5.1.c for height in industrial and commercial zones, and the addition of a new PCE, passenger car equivalent tables in section 6.11. A full copy of proposed changes can be found in the Planning and Zoning Office. We have a revised set of regulation additions, revised date 9/18/2023 and 9/29/2023. an inspection report from the Wallingford Fire Department, signed on 9/15/2023. And correspondence from OCC Design Consortium LLC Land Development Consultants by David V. Carson, dated October 10th, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Allenson. And at this point in time, I would turn this, just one question. As far as the revision, the 9/29/2023, this was also, we received an additional revision, correct?
Correct.
Mr.
Yep,
Pagini?
that would be 10/10/2023.
And that was sent out to commission members earlier today.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Yes, the email correspondence with the additional revision.
Thank you, Mr. Allenson. Again, just a little insight into this. We're looking to make some revisions to our warehousing regulations. The commission has had several workshops concerning warehousing, and we've had, again, several discussions on this, and this is what has been or the result, rather, of the various meetings. So with that, Mr. Pagini, I will turn it over to you, as this is a revisions advanced by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if you could please make all the commission members fully aware, as well as the public, what we're discussing here.
Okay, so I won't read every definition, but a synopsis is we're adding proposed definitions. They will be subsections under the definition of warehousing and distribution. So they will be defined by the following categories, which will be category A would be general warehousing and distribution. So that has its own definition, and that would be defined as ITE Manual Land Use Code 150, and that will be as the primary use is the storage and distribution of goods. It may also include accessory office and maintenance areas, and that will be less than or equal to 100,000 square feet in size and less than or equal to 100 parking spaces. Subsection B would be heavy warehousing and distribution. This is the primary use as the storage and distribution of goods, same as the first one, low automation involved with, so this would be any building greater than 100,000 square feet in size and or greater than 100 parking spaces. And this is the same land use code as the first one, except it's the size and number of parking spaces. This is also land use code 150 as defined by the ITE manual. And just a note that these changes, as per law department recommendation and also consultation with the town engineer, will be restricted to the ITE manual 11th edition. So if there are any changes, if a new edition comes out, we'd have to make corrections based on those changes. But we wanted to restrict it to that, so there can't be any confusion as to which manual we're referring to. The subsection C is the high cube warehouse general. This includes transload and short-term storage and cold storage. These are the warehouses with the higher ceilings, typically exceeding 28 feet. These may also include accessory office and maintenance areas. These facilities that contain high levels of automation and logistics management. And cold storage warehouses are typified by temperature-controlled environments for frozen food or other perishable products. This includes land use codes as identified by the ITE manual as 154 and 157. And finally, we define subsection D, which is high cube warehouse e-commerce. These are the two land use codes, 155 and 156, that we decided on. Strictly prohibiting in all zones within the town, so it specifically mentions that within the definition. Any questions on that?
If you would just explain, just for maybe the general public, as far as the high cube warehouses, e-commerce, what specifically that is. I mean, it's essentially the last mile delivery.
Yeah, specifically, these are the last mile facilities. They're characterized by a significant storage function and direct distribution of e-commerce products to consumers and/or end users. So they handle smaller packages and quantities, so there's a higher amount of traffic that takes place, substantially more than the other warehousing uses.
So it would be more like, to a very large degree, it's the vans and even sometimes, cars. I
Correct.
think we've seen in some, situations where it's even personal cars where
Yeah.
people are working, as a subcontractor or whatever.
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, you could have a smaller building, but you'd have a lot of parking, a lot of traffic. I'd say it's, 10 times as much traffic as some of the other uses. So I think if it's something that we'd want to revisit in the future, at least we have that ability to revisit it if necessary.
Okay. Before you go any further, just any commission members with any, questions on the, the various classifications? Seeing none, Mr. Pagini, if you please continue.
So as for the definitions I just went through, general warehousing and distribution would be added as a site plan approval use as under number 4 and 4.8, the industrial districts. So that's the I-40 and the I-20. Also added to the submission of a traffic impact analysis was just a little blurb about consulting specific requirements for warehousing and distribution. In case there is a site plan approval that somehow trips the 100 peak trips, then they would have to follow the specific requirements for warehousing and distribution, which I'll get to now. So under the special permit section in 4.8, this is still in the industrial districts, I-40, I-20. So that would be number 13. As a special permit use would be high cube warehouse general and the heavy warehousing and distribution. We decided to remove freight terminals and drop yards because we didn't see a real difference between those type of uses. If someone wants to do a drop yard, they could essentially do it as outside storage, and a freight terminal, we really didn't see anywhere that a freight terminal could fit in town that would differ from a warehouse. So it was kind of per the recommendation of the law department, and I also consulted with the economic development specialist, and he didn't see an issue with removing those from that definition. So this would be, so all of these uses, any special permit use would require a full traffic study utilizing passenger car equivalents, section 611, table 2, to be submitted as part of the application, and shall include a detailed breakdown and analysis of the operation, including the proposed number of semi-trucks per 24-hour period, and proposed percentage of truck-to-car traffic, and that would be table 1 in section 611. So that's in addition to AM and PM peak hour trips, peak hour of generator, and Saturday are to be included, and that just refers to the tables again. And B, the commission may require a noise study. It may require noise mitigation strategies for the operation. C, view shed analysis and or visual impact analysis if required by commission. D, shall not be located less than 500 feet from the boundary of a residential or rural residential district. The commission may decrease this requirement if it finds that topographic or other physical site characteristics supports a reduction. E, maximum height of 80 feet. And F, in all cases in which the commission determines that a peer review of any of the required studies is warranted, so not just the traffic study, the applicant shall be required to pay the town for the cost of the peer review. The applicant shall pay the town the estimated cost of the peer review in advance and shall be remitted any overpayment or shall pay any additional balance. The failure to pay the cost of the review shall render the application incomplete and subject to denial. So those are relatively the same across the board for each district, with the exception of the IX, which I'll get to next.
But if you would, before you get into that, Mr. Pagini, because again, when you're talking about 13A, as far as the, the full traffic study,
Yeah.
utilizing the passenger car equivalents. And that's something that's, that's something that's new that we're putting into the regulations. And you might want to explain, just for the benefit of everyone, just how that would work. What's the starting point, and then how do we work through it?
So we'd receive an application, say we received an application under heavy warehousing and distribution. They would come under ITE Land Use Code 150, so they'd have to submit a traffic study under that land use code, and then they would have to provide all of the information as outlined in that section under special permit uses, and that would have to go to the, they'd have to go to the table that is being proposed. That would be Table 1, Land Use Code 150, and so that would require that the traffic study includes, at a minimum, 70% passenger cars, 10% 2 to 4 axle trucks, and then 20% 5 axle trucks.
But just to be clear, though, but the base that you're starting with is, we're taking the IT, the code,
Correct.
and if that's, if it's a 200,000 square foot building,
Yeah.
based on the IT code, that would generate X number of trips, correct?
Correct.
So that's your starting point.
Yes.
Okay. So then if you just kind of go explain down, if that starting point now for trips was, for want of a number to make it easy, 100 vehicles, that's their starting point. Then if you could just explain to everyone how this chart then would work.
So if it's 100 vehicles under Land Use Code 150, they would have to provide a traffic study that shows at a minimum 70% of the traffic is passenger cars, 10% of the traffic is 2 to 4 axle trucks, and 20% of the traffic is 5+ axle trucks. And then those multipliers from Table 2 would be applied to the trucks. So 10% of those, which would be roughly 10 if there was 100 trips, would be multiplied by 3, and that would equal roughly another 30 car trips. And then the 20%, so 20 times 4, that would be another 80 car trips, because it's a passenger car equivalent. So this table is showing that 2 to 4 axle truck actually equals 3 cars, if that makes sense.
Sure. So I think essentially at the end of the day, if we were just simply using in the past the IT manual, that would come out to be, if it came out to 100 trips, that would just simply be 100 trips. But I think as we've gone through various applications and just looked at traffic, I think it's it's clear to say that a tractor trailer certainly should have a higher equivalent number of trips, if you would, than a car, simply because it's larger. So what this does is it increases the number of trips, or the equivalent number of cars, if you would. So it's much more, let's say it's much more conservative when we're looking at how much traffic a warehouse or a land use would create. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. With that, before you continue, I guess any commission members on any questions just concerning the traffic study and other things that would be required under the special permit. Mr. Cohen.
I hope my question falls into this section, because Mr. Pagini went through the definitions, and I just have a question on the definitions. So hopefully this is appropriate. If not, I can wait till later. So, in the notes, I think that these definitions are critical to our regulations, and they pretty much are identical to what's in the ITE edition 11 manual. And it suggested that we stick with these definitions, and if they change, in the ITE manual that we need to change our definitions. So basically my question is, does there have to be a little more wording in our definitions to state that? Say they change use code 150 and, we do not change our regulations. Does that negate our regulations at that point? Basically, how do we handle it if there is a change to the manual? I think this is a great idea, and I think we should have that in the regulations. But how do we solidify it, I guess, so that, we don't get caught, with a, and I don't know how often they're going to change, definitions. Maybe they're set for the next 20 years. I don't know. But, how do we ensure that we keep pace with, what the definitions are stated and keep up to date with the ITE manual?
I didn't, so just for clarification, I didn't use exact definitions from the ITE manual, but they are obviously following the land use codes from the ITE manual. So I believe in talking to the town engineer, I'm obviously not a traffic engineer, but I think if anything does change, it'll be uses that are added to this. So I think the land use code 150 has been in there, I think, since the beginning. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's been in there for quite a while. I believe the high cube warehouse general, so those would be the short-term storage and cold storage and transload warehouses. Those were newer additions, as well as the e-commerce uses. So I think the only thing we would have to maybe get ahead of is if they add something, then we'd have to maybe add it into our regulations. I don't think it would. I don't think they would necessarily take it away, and then we would, have something that we wouldn't recognize. So I think if anything, it would be more so that if they add something, it would be essentially something that wouldn't be allowed, and then we'd have to maybe look at adding that to it. That's the best explanation I can get. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm asking a tough question, and there's no easy answer to it. And I do agree with you. They probably are just going to add something. And again, they may not ever change these. But if, say they change the definition of heavy warehousing to make it, 75,000 square feet instead of 100,000 square feet. Is this something the town engineer would, be responsible for? Basically, how do we, I guess when a new manual comes out, we're going to look at this and then, okay.
Yeah, I think we just have to modify it based upon, whenever a new manual comes out. I think the 11th edition just came out recently. I'm not exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
I know they don't come out too often. I think it's, once every couple of years, I think. But I'd have to check on that, obviously. But she didn't seem too concerned with restricting us to this now, because it's better to do it this way than leave it wide open to where they can come in and say.
Yeah, agree. And I think the wording in their land use codes is mentioned below, restricted to the IT manual 11th edition. Should suffice, I think. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Any other commission members? Mr. Parent.
I'm sorry. Hello? Okay. It says distributions of goods, but it doesn't say to who. I mean, would this be to like on this general warehouse and distribution, would that go, would that be going to a wholesaler, or would somebody be able to pick up a washer dryer from this warehouse?
Yeah, I think it's just a general, primary use as storage and distribution. I don't know if we have to get too specific on, who's coming to get it. We do mention that, it does not involve the distribution of e-commerce products to end users. So therefore, this would be general warehousing and distribution. I don't know if you want to get more specific, but the law department and myself kind of went back and forth as to, how to describe the either goods or materials or, how in-depth you want to get. But if you want to revisit it, we can.
No, but I mean, but the way you've got it written, okay, if somebody sends me I want to buy a washer and dryer, and the hardware store says, well, go up to this warehouse and pick it up, and they'll put it on your pickup truck. Could happen, maybe.
Yeah.
Probably 9 times out of 10, the person would come up from the hardware store, put it on his pickup, and bring it back to the store for use in a showroom. But this way kind of allows both.
Yeah, I think so, because it kind of allows, pickup and distribution, so you're not restricting too much, hopefully.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Parent. With that, Mr. Pagini, if you would continue, please.
In the IX district, essentially the same requirements, with the exception of the restrictions on Northrop Road and North Farms Road and Tankwood Road. So that would be under B as in boy, under the special permit requirements, and basically all warehousing in the IX because of those restrictions would be under special permit. There's no other way to really add those restrictions on those roads in without requiring all of those uses as a special permit. So high cube warehouse, general, heavy warehousing and distribution, and general warehousing and distribution would all be special permit uses subject to the following requirements. So all of those are the same except B, and so that would be driveway access cannot be utilized from North Farms Road, Tankwood Road, or Northrop Road, except access to facility can be utilized within the first 1,000 feet of Northrop Road as measured north from the Route 68 intersection right-of-way line. Any questions on that?
I believe not.
So, WI district, there was one site plan approval use, so that would be general warehousing and distribution. And also that has the minor blurb in case some kind of site plan approval does somehow trip the 100 peak trips. That would be consult specific requirements as outlined in section 410C2. And so the WI district would allow high cube warehouse, general, and heavy warehousing and distribution. We didn't exclude freight terminals and drop yards because we disallowed them across the board. And the WI does not allow for outside storage anyway, so hopefully that negates all of that. The law department didn't see any issues by doing it that way, as we're excluding it across the board. It requires all of the same requirements as the industrial district, so the full traffic study, the noise study, the view shed analysis, the shall not be located less than 500 feet unless the commission finds that something supports a reduction, the maximum height of 80 feet, and the peer review language. So that was it for the actual zoning districts and requirements. Now I'm going on to section 611, which is the parking requirements. Parking requirements for general warehousing and distribution. So that's the first definition under A. That would be one space per 1,500 square feet of gross floor area. And then for heavy warehousing and distribution and high cube warehouse general, it would be one space per 2,000 square feet of gross floor area. And then also deletion of the parcel sorting and retail distribution, as that will be prohibited. And we also deleted wholesale distribution warehouses and trucking terminals and just replaced it with those new definitions. And I can go over the land use code tables again, or I don't know if is everyone clear on those? So these two new tables will replace the deleted trip generation table that was in the last page of section 611, and that will be replaced as table 1 and table 2. Table 1 will be vehicle percentages per land use code. And these we're taking the percentage of passenger cars, 2 to 4 axle trucks and 5+ axle trucks. So any traffic study will have to utilize those codes. Obviously, 155 and 156 are prohibited, but we just kept them in there for the future. PCE, passenger car equivalent table. So, like I said before, passenger car will always equal 1. 2 to 4 axle trucks will equal 3 passenger cars, and 5+ axle trucks will equal 4 passenger cars. And finally, the changes to the height. I sort of thought the language in the asterisks at the end was sort of confusing, so I just changed it to in the industrial zones. A lot of the buildings down there are taller than 30 feet as it is, so the I-40 is proposed to raise the base building height to 40 feet with the asterisk to maximum building height may be increased provided the setback requirements are increased 1 foot for each additional foot of building height. And then the I-20 is a 35-foot base height, just given the kind of geographical restrictions of that zone. It's not as expansive as the I-40, so and again, the building height may be increased provided the setback requirements are increased 1 foot for each additional foot of building height. The IX, I did keep the base height at 30. I guess there could be discussion. I think we did get comments asking for an increase to 40, but that allows the maximum height to be increased by 1 foot for every 2 feet, by which to a maximum height of 80 feet. And the WI, just kept that at 40 and just cleaned up the language there just to allow the maximum height maybe increase 1 foot for every 2 feet, and then a maximum height of 80 feet. So it's, 1 foot for every 2 feet of, 1 foot for each. It's just you have to have the setback, so you could, if you have enough room, you can go up to a maximum height of 80 feet, essentially is what it says. Any questions or discussion on the heights?
Questions? Mr. Hine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just noticed that the language for the one asterisk and the one with 2 is a little bit different.
Yes.
I'm wondering if we can make that those 2 paragraphs consistent.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, like the second one should probably say the maximum building height may be increased by, whatever it is. Is it by 1 foot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could make it consistent. That makes sense.
Or 2 feet for every 1 foot of additional setback. I mean, I'm not sure. Just the way that it's left there, it's not clear to me what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it was it's sort of implied the way it was written, but I just kind of deleted it. So I'll look at maybe rewording it to match the first one. That makes
Yeah, I mean,
a lot more
I just
sense.
think the two should be consistent. And then the only other thing was that that was the height in the IX zone was something that Mr. Carson had mentioned. He thought maybe the I-40, I-20, and the IX should all be 40 feet. I'm not sure if what your thoughts are, or I'm sorry, the WI. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, and why it is that you want to keep the IX at 30 for the time being.
I think in general, the IX, the buildings there are lower than some of the industrial areas. So and there's enough space out there where I think you probably could, go higher than 40 if needed. I just didn't see a real reason as increasing the base height, but I don't know if the commission feels as though that's something that would be, helpful. I think that would make sense to match it with the WI at least for the building height. I-20, I was a little leery on going, too much higher than that, just because, like I said, it's not a very big district. It doesn't have a lot of areas, and I think some of the areas are closer to residential. So, but it might be something to discuss and see where we would land on it. I don't have any issue with going to 40 feet in the IX. I don't think it makes too much of a difference whether or not it's a 40-foot base height or a 30-foot base height. If someone wants to build a smaller building, they will. So, but
And I guess my only other question is, how many properties are there in the IX and WI that you're aware of that would be able to handle that 80-foot max height? Because it seems to say in that second paragraph there that you could go up, if you can decrease the setback, or I'm sorry, increase the setback enough that you could go up to 80 feet. And I guess the question is, how many properties in those two districts are capable of doing that?
I'd say the WI would be a bit harder just because the front setback is 100 feet, whereas in the IX it's 60, and the IX has probably more available land to do that. So I'd say the IX probably has more of a capability at doing that than the WI does. The WI doesn't have a lot of properties left that would maybe have enough room to go up to 80 feet necessarily. I don't know. I'd have to do some calculations and some measurements and whatnot, but off of the top of my head, maybe only 5 Research Parkway and a couple of other vacant pieces of land that are out there, maybe 10 Technology Drive, something like that. But I think part of that's also in the IX too. So, but I'd have to kind of double check on that. But I'd say that the IX definitely has more potential for taller buildings just because of the amount of vacant land and area that's left up there.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Any other commission members? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. It's open to any comment from members of the public. If people would like to comment, please raise their hand, and we'll begin calling on individuals. Yes, the gentleman in the back, and then I guess the gentleman in front of him would be the next speaker. And again, if you just please give us your name and address and then your comments.
Good evening, Commissioners. Is this on?
I think it is.
Okay. For the record, my name is David Carson. I'm the managing principal of the OCC Group. As you mentioned this evening, I did submit some correspondence with regard primarily to building height. I have followed along with the workshops in the development of these regulations and have talked to the town planner several times. And in general, I'm in agreement with the proposed amendments to the regulations. I think the exception with regard to the building height in the IX zone as compared to the I-40 and the WI zone really stands out as why. The 30-foot height, which presently is in the regulations, that was established in 2002. Back in 2002, your ideal warehouse clear height was 24 feet. The standard clear height in a modern-day warehouse is 36 feet. It actually, from a town standpoint, it would, in my opinion, be desirable to encourage new warehouse development to build to the new standards. 20 years from now, a 20-foot clear height warehouse won't even be a warehouse. It'll be an abandoned building looking for another use. So we really want to encourage the building of modern warehouses. If you look at a national level, something like 87% of all proposed warehouses in the United States are proposed with 36-foot clear heights. Something like 73% of all approved buildings under construction have 36-foot high clear heights. And it may sound like a lot, but if you stop and think, a single-family colonial house is 35 feet tall. So 40 feet is not astronomical. Of course, the regulations, as proposed, allow to go much higher. But it appears to me that a base height of 40 feet is actually the appropriate size. And it also would actually discourage the building of more buildings, more footprints with a lower height, which is discussed. The IX zone happens to be an area, a large area that could accommodate a lot of buildings. It would be better to have more efficient buildings, with a 40-foot height than buildings spread out with a 30-foot height, if in fact anybody would build them. I'm not really certain that you would attract a lot of development with that restriction. And as I say, it made sense in 2002, but it really doesn't, I don't think, make sense in 2023. And since you're looking at that, I would encourage you to change that one thing in the regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other members of the public? Yes. Gentleman in the back there.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Jim Wolf. I'm a member of the Economic Development Commission. On the first page of the changes, the high cube warehousing e-commerce is strictly prohibited. I think that puts a little bit of a dent into the growth of Wallingford. Wallingford has been a very diversified town. We have almost every industry here, from mining on one end to car lots, or everything in between. And I know a lot of this is driven by traffic. And these regulations say that retail distribution. And given that this is driven by traffic, it doesn't say retail distribution of vehicles or use of vehicles. I brought this up at one of the prior meetings. I think on our horizon very soon are going to be drone deliveries. And to eliminate this whole industry, once they take the traffic off the roads and eliminates these problems, I think it's a mistake. We have to look towards the future. And I just think this could be written so that it's not totally eliminating it. It's eliminating it by the means in which it works now. And I know that gets a little involved, and believe me, you're talking to a guy that I don't know what my cell phone does yet. So, these drones, but they're coming. They're already testing them, and I just don't want to eliminate what could be very, beneficial to the town.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public? Yes, gentleman on the right.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Kevin Cornell, residing at 59 Green Hill Road, Orange, Connecticut, representing a landowner, Midwood Management, and John Usden. We have 46 acres in the northwest quadrant of Route 68 and Northrop Road, between the reservoir and Northrop Road. And if I could approach the Commission and the staff, I just have a little visual because I'd like to discuss one other section to consider.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't bite.
So Midwood's owned this land for over 30 years and been waiting for the state of Connecticut to have a pulse to develop it. And I'd first like to thank the Commission and the staff for increasing our opportunities by considering warehousing in what was formerly the I-5 zone. The more options you have, the more we can attract, high beneficial uses into the town at basically the gateway of Route 68 and 91. So the thing I'd like to discuss is in the IX regulation, you're calling for a 500-foot buffer for these uses from residential zones. And by a trick of geography, the RU40 zone is on the eastern side of North Farms Reservoir. So effectively, out of our 46 acres, the use is prohibited in 23 of the 46 acres. And while I believe it's certainly appropriate to buffer residences from, the noise impacts or visual impacts of a trucking use, it seems that there might be a different way of achieving it, getting the buffer you're trying to achieve to protect your residential citizens while still allowing the use to occur on a significant piece of land. Any questions?
I guess you've indicated there may be a better way to do that. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, you have a very competent town planner, but if the idea is to buffer with sound, and your regulations have something about sound studies, then maybe you guys have the ability to the 500-foot buffer is a review area, not a prohibition, where it's something you consider as on the way to making your decision. If it's visual, perhaps it's a screening question that if the house is across North Farms Reservoir and you can't see it, perhaps, again, it's something that, you can waive during the special permit process. Or maybe it's a different distance, but, I think there might be Dave Carson could certainly, work on some language with, Mr. Pagini, if that would be of interest to you guys.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Gentleman over here, I believe, sir, you wanted to comment? No, please.
Good evening, Bob DeMeo, Murray Lane. As you guys probably know, I've been at most of these meetings. I think the result we have tonight that we're looking at, I think it's a great outcome, frankly. You guys have addressed a nationwide issue. And frankly, I would say some of the work here that's been done could be considered a best practice at some point, at least heading towards that. There's a couple things that I think I would want to point out quickly. The PCE table, and I mentioned this to the town planner, that's section 6.11 where there's the percentage of vehicles. That is not out of a manual, so that's not something you can open a book. Certainly the ITE, you start with the counts, as the chairman said, but that table that says 70% cars, 20% truck, that was derived by the engineer, and I'm sure she did a fine job. I just think that we need to have a mechanism to update that as as time permits or when it makes sense. So that was one item that I think, similar to Mr. Cohen's point about the addition and keeping on top of changes, that would be one thing I'd want to point out. I would just say, relative to e-commerce, I think you made the right decision on that. I think we all got a small taste down on Cherry Street of what parcel sorting looks like, and I don't think we want any more of it. So I think you did the right thing there. Lastly, I guess I would say, and maybe I'm being greedy here, but I think the passenger car equivalent implementation that the town planner and Allison worked on, I think it's fantastic. I think it's something that maybe not now, but you'll want to look at and say, well, we've got this tool now in our toolbox that allows us to look at vehicles. To the chairman's point, 100 vehicles, it turns into 180 pretty quickly. Your regulations, as you guys well know, in the special permit requirements in almost every district say if it's an allowed use but it has over 100 vehicles, peak trips, or if it's an expanded use and it has 25 vehicle trips, you might want to think about, not today, not for this meeting, but that is something that I would suggest. If we think passenger car equivalence is the right way to measure traffic, why wouldn't we put it in, to replace the statement that says over 100 vehicle trips requires a special permit? So those are really my comments. I guess I just want to say thank you to the town planner. I think you did a tremendous job. I think you guys, I appreciate your taking the public's input, and I think, you clearly have advanced the ball here. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Carson.
Again, David Carson, OCC Group. With regard to the buffer area that Mr. Cornell was referring to, I think a simple way of addressing this specific issue, and it may apply to other areas in town without having any significant impact on the way the regulations are proposed, that instead of measuring the buffer from the zone line, measure the buffer from existing residential development. And in this particular case, that would obviously solve the problem. There's residential development, 1,500 feet across the reservoir. I'd even go so far as to say that I don't know if there are other areas in town where this applies, but I think a buffer from existing residential development is appropriate. I know this is an issue that has come up frequently over the years in Southington. Even in the case where, let's say, North Farms Reservoir did not exist, and that was a gigantic piece of property, a piece of undeveloped property. Well, you shouldn't really be restricting the use of the IX property because there's an undeveloped property next door. If 10 years down the road, a developer wanted to come along and build houses there, and the people who wanted to buy these houses had no problem being right next to an industrial zone, well, then fine, there is no problem. So I think the significant part of what I'm saying is that the buffer should be from existing residential development. And you're protecting the existing residents of the town, which was the sense that I got through the workshop meeting, that that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to protect some future person. We're trying to protect taxpayers of the town with any new development that may come in the present time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone, any other members of the public like to speak? Sir, I'll give you one more chance.
Sorry, Bob DeMeo, Marie Lane. I forgot one item, an important one. In the WI district, we're allowing general warehousing as a right. We're adding that, which is our sensitive, low-intensity district. However, in the IX, it is not allowed as a right. So I thought that was a little bit counterintuitive. I'm not sure the traffic is that much different in the two zones. I think that was potentially the reason for it, but I would suggest that maybe that should not be allowed as a right, and it should just make it consistent in the IX and the WI that those 3 or 4 classifications of warehousing all require a special permit. Again, it just feels a little bit counterintuitive that we're allowing it as a right in the WI and not in the IX.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Mr. Pagini, would you like to comment on that comment?
Which one?
About what this gentleman had just discussed.
Oh, yes. The town engineer and myself feel the roads are more conducive for traffic, for that allowable as a site plan in the WI, and the senior engineer at the water division didn't have any objections to allowing it. He didn't feel as though something that size, that low intensity, being 100,000 square feet would have much of an impact. So that was why we allowed it as a site plan approval. Obviously, you could change it if needed, but that was our rationale behind it. And then as far as the buffer goes, the commission does have the ability, if there is, say, physical site characteristics such as a reservoir, to completely get rid of the requirement if necessary. So, and I don't know if, I believe next to his property that they're mentioning, there is an existing residential house that would restrict the development just as much. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I think there is a house that's there next to that medical building. So I think maybe wording it as residentially zoned property boundary, something like that, so you're not, being too restrictive as far as, existing residential properties go, but you're being more, I'd say, trying to think of the words here. You're being safer towards residentially zoned areas rather than, existing houses in the IX, which may be ultra restrictive, considering that there are quite a number of residential houses in the WI and the IX. WI has probably, I think Thorpe Ave is an entire road of houses. So if you restrict 500 feet from there, you're basically taking away pretty much all development on a number of those parcels. So I think if the intent is to protect residentially zoned areas, I think we should look at that a little bit more closely.
So essentially, you're saying, at least in your opinion, to keep it the way it is, not to make an adjustment. Is that correct?
You could maybe make an adjustment and say maybe not from the boundary of the district, but maybe the property boundary of a residentially zoned district, something like that. Or I don't know, I'd have to play around with the language, but essentially the property boundary and not the actual district boundary. So because of North Farms Reservoir obviously wouldn't be considered a residential property, so you'd probably be taking that buffer line from the back of those properties on North Farms Road, essentially.
Based, I guess, looking at the 500-foot buffer, based on what we're proposing here, does the commission have the ability to reduce that if it wanted, if there was the justification?
Yes, in the IX, under anything that would be under a special permit requirement. But if it was, say, a site plan approval in the WI and it was, say, 500 feet, no, you would not be able to reduce that. It would be just any project that would be a...
So any project would be a special permit, is that correct, what you're saying?
Correct.
I believe Mr. Allison has a question or two.
Just along those lines, Mr. Pagini, let's say hypothetical person would otherwise apply for a site plan, but they need that reduction of that 500 foot. If they were to apply for a special permit specifically for the purposes of that reduction, would that be able to pass?
Yeah, I don't see why not. We've had that in the past, so.
Then I think that resolves it.
Yeah, it would seem that would resolve the issue then. It's fair to say, Mr. Pagini?
Yes.
Good. Other commission members, any comments? Again, Mr. Pagini, anything final from you before I ask for a motion to close the public hearing?
No further comments.
Okay. So if there's no further comments from commission members, I'd ask for a motion to close our public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close public hearing for application 904-23, zoning text amendment, Planning and Zoning Commission warehousing in I-40, I-20, IX, and WI zones.
Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, voting beginning with Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
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 And yes. At this point in time, I've entertained a motion on our on this application.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve application 904-23, text amendment to modify sections 2.2, 4.8, 4.9, 4.10, 5.2C, and 6.11 of the Town of Wallingford zoning regulations as outlined in language dated 9/7/2023 and revised to 10/10/2023 because the zoning regulations more clearly define the different types of warehousing and what is allowable in the zones.
We have a motion on the application. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, voting beginning with Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
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 And yes. And this has been approved. I certainly like to say, Mr. Pagini, I thank you and our town engineer for all the work that you folks have put into this. With that, moving on, new business, number 5, the highlight agenda on our application on our agenda, which is a site plan, a special permit, rather a multifamily conversion, I'm sorry, for D&M McNally at 98 Simpson Avenue. If the applicant would please come forward to begin preparing for the presentation. And Mr. Allison, if you would please note all correspondence for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the interdepartmental referral, cover sheet for the application for site plan, and the set of site plans.
And we have some,
I apologize.
2 items.
We also have an interoffice memorandum from Scott Shipman, Senior Engineer, to Kevin Pagini, Town Planner, dated September 27th, 2023. and an inspection report from the Wallingford Fire Department dated 9/19/23.
Thank you, Mr. Al. If the applicants would please introduce themselves and give us a brief overview of what their application is. And if you please just make sure you pull the microphone close to you.
Thank you. Thank the commission, and I am Michelle McNally. This is my husband, Donald. We are at Kondracki Drive in Wallingford, Connecticut, and we seek approval for a plan to turn our existing 3-story, 2-family home into a 3-family home. We are planning a studio apartment on the existing 3rd floor, and we want to add 3 additional parking spaces to the existing 3 spaces behind the home. This would bring the total to 6 for the 3 apartments, and it includes a turnaround as part of the surveyor's plan. We do not plan to cut into any additional curbing, and we are planning a little bit of additional landscaping to the existing fence to be compliant. We met with the fire marshal, Brian Schock, to make sure that it meets, his approval, and received a plan to upgrade a few things to make it, compliant with his recommendations.
Good. That's the extent of it? Good. Thank you. Mr. Pagini, any comments on the application? It seems to be.
No, it's pretty straightforward. It just had to be compliant with section 6.22, and I believe they've met all those requirements. So I don't have any further comment.
Sure. Commission members, any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion on, unless you'd like to make any further comments. It's your time on TV. At this point in time, I'd entertain a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve application 226-23, 98 Simpson Ave, McNally. Site plan approval request for McNally to convert an existing 2-family dwelling to a 3-family dwelling at 98 Simpson Ave on plans entitled Proposed Site Plan 98 Simpson Avenue, dated 8/24/2023, subject to 1, comments from the fire marshal dated 9/19/2023, 2, comments from senior engineer Scott Shipman, Water and Sewer Division, dated 9/27/2023, and number 3, 6 copies of the final approval plans forward to the Planning and Zoning Department.
We have a motion on the application. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. Voting beginning with Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
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 And yes, your application's been approved. Have a good evening.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. All right, Mr. Pagini, taking us now to item number 6, town purchase of 138 Williams Road, 40.7 acre parcel. If you'd please give some brief comments on what this is.
Pretty self-explanatory, but the town is interested in purchasing a 40.7 acre parcel. It lies within the watershed area, so this piece is critical. The Water Division's goals to preserve open space within the watershed, and this will protect the public drinking water supply for the town.
Any commission members, any questions? Seeing none, I guess we'd look for a motion on this.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the purchase of 138 Williams Road based on application, no, it's no application, Connecticut General Statute 8-24 request for the town of Wallingford to purchase a 40.7 acre parcel located at 138 Williams Road because this preserves open space in the watershed area.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. Voting beginning with Mr. Fitzsimmons, please.
Yes.
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 And yes. The action has been approved. And Mr. Pagini, if you'd please just take the wheel to bring us through the rest of the agenda.
Number 7, site plan bond release. That bond can be released.
Do we have a motion to release the bond?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we release the bond for application 228-07, site plan United Concrete 494 Main Street, Yalesville.
Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on.
Administrative approvals, any questions on those? Have just a couple within the town center area. ZBA decisions, anything on those?
Any questions on the ZBA?
Any questions on the ZBA meeting for next week, or actually a couple days?
I don't believe so.
All right, and the last is the zoning enforcement report. As you can see, third quarter centered around problem sites and following up on violations referred to the law department, which means they exhausted all means of available enforcement, yet the violations still persist. Sign sweep was done in August and yielded 100% compliance. And subsequently, we're still trying to do an update, rewrite of the current sign regulations, so that's still in process. 2 legal referrals, the 96 Quinnipiac Street, the use violation, the infamous vape shop, that's finally gone, so they've vacated. So that's good. And 68 North Turnpike, that's been ongoing for about 3 years, and they pretty much have everything restored and cleaned up. So court action has been withdrawn. And then next week, we're going out to inspect possible compliance for the Silversmith Park, the wood pellet operation. I'm not still exactly sure what they do there. That's why we're going out, making sure everything is corrected. I believe, I've been told that they removed pretty much all of the pile that was there. So that was a pretty big issue, and I'm happy that we took care of that. So we're going to go see, they still have some floodplain outdoor storage violations, and I believe they do not have a special permit to operate, so hopefully they'll be able to convince them just to come in, rectify everything, get everything squared up, and not have to pursue further court action. And then the 2 10-year-old violations that are in the midst of Superior Court action, I believe that was 384 South Colony, the special permit violations, and the 471 South Elm Street. I won't get into too much detail with those, but those are still being pursued. And there's a consistent flow of compliance requests from lenders. Not too many have been denied for there's been some unknown violations that have been uncovered during those. And the cease and desist, so the one that obviously would be of importance to the commission, obviously, is Walmart. They are in the process of formally submitting a plan to rectify it, but as of right now, it has been temporarily closed off. So at least now it's safe for the time being until they can, I believe they have to get DOT and OSTA approval for the finality of that plan. And
Just if I could, just with the Walmart one, if you would just, indicate to, I know that Mrs. Torrey has spent quite a bit of time on that as well as our legal department, but if you would just indicate to Mrs. Torrey that certainly the commission is very appreciative for all the effort she's put into this, because this is, it's been going on for quite some time with Walmart, and finally, there's been, some action taken by Walmart. So you would just let her know that we certainly appreciate that.
Yep, absolutely. So there's obviously still a large correlation between zoning violations and building violations. So roughly 75% of residential zoning violations stem from unpermitted building activity, and then that leads to a zoning violation. In many cases, variances are being sought after the fact to rectify these violations, and several denials of these requests from the ZBA have become legal referrals, as a violating structure or use is not removed or rectified following denial. So that's basically a synopsis of what's been going on with violations.
Any commission members with any questions on this? Seeing none, if there's no additional orders of business coming before us, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, October 11th at 2023.
Good. Don't you want to put the time in there?
It's
Do we
not a
have a
record.
se-
It's
do
not
we-
a record, so I won't do it.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Thank you, gentlemen. Have a very good evening.